This is a true story from Sumatra, Indonesia's big island. And the story goes on. Unlike many other animals, young orangutans are dependent on their mothers for many years. But what if an illness robs them of their eyesight and they don't find any food anymore, no matter how hard they try? Even though this specimen is way too young, the daughter cares for her mother, who got weaker and weaker. But some fruits are forbidden, a death zone for orangutans. Their forest is constantly changing. Its edges are eaten up by more and more fields and plantations. Others are expanding the habitat, planting seeds and harvesting crops. Who owns those new fruits? What shall the orangutans eat? The mostly poor farmers are rather bothered by other problems. But as the business with tropical wood and palm oil started to boom, there are no limits for felling trees and slash and burn. The orangutans on Borneo and Sumatra are on the losing side. No chance for the almost blind mother. But environmentalists have been watching starving Gober, as they have called her for quite some time. A tranquilizer dart shall avoid her impending death. Remove her before she is treated as vermin by the plantation owners. But her daughter Gibi escapes the saviors. The last refuge for homeless orangutans. None of them will starve here. Emotional pain is harder to heal. There are remarkably many young orangutans at the quarantine station of SOCP, the Sumatran Orangutan Conservation Program. Most of them probably had to watch their own mother be killed on plantations. Orangutan mother Gober, who suffers from cataracts and is almost blind, recovers slowly here. But when she got to the station, she was no longer with her child. Loisa, a fit young orangutan male, has already spent 2 years of his life behind these bars. He's blind too, and couldn't survive life in the forest anymore. For Ian Singleton and his crew, injured or mutilated orangutans are part of their daily routine. They know too well that their fosterlings are only the tip of the iceberg. Loisa's story could have happened to many others of his kind. He was returned to the wild some years ago at another rescue center. But one day, he dared to come out of the forest.
One day, he wandered about 40 kilometers away from the national park boundary into some farmland around a village. And there were some farmers there with some air rifles, and they took shots at him. He was quite nice and friendly to humans, so he was probably just like amazed that humans would treat him so badly and shooting at him and stuff like that. So he didn't immediately run away. And he ended up with like 62 air rifle pellets in his body. Apart from being blind and having these pellets inside him, he's fit and well. All the orangutans you see at this center, these are the lucky ones. You know, these are the survivors of the process. Most of them are dead. They don't get this far.
One day, Ian Singleton wants to provide survivors like Loisa with a suitable habitat, orangutan haven, care without cages or bars. Until enough funds are collected for this venture, blind orangutans like Loisa or Gober will be forced to spend their lives behind bars, Ian Singleton admits, with a heavy heart. This selected and healthy food is probably the only consolation for these intelligent and sensible animals. In order for Gober to take part in life a little more, Ian tries something that isn't usually done at the station. Only the cage bars separate the two blind orangutans for several days. A boy and a girl. 9 months after her encounter with Loisa, Gober gives birth to twins. Will she now, after 2 years, get over the loss of her daughter who stayed in the forest? She's still alive, by the way.
Hello, Gober. Hey, nice.
As a former animal keeper, Ian heard of orangutan twins in zoos, but they are quite rare, for a good reason.
In the wild, we think it happens as well, but almost always one of the infants or even both may not survive, because it must be hard to carry baby orangutans through the treetops and find food at the same time. So the chances of a fall or an accident are probably quite high.
Such danger doesn't exist here, but life in a cage can't be a viable solution for two healthy young orangutans.
It's in their best interest to spend as long as they can with their mother, but there's always a chance that Gober will die within the next 5 to 15 years if she really is that old. If we can eventually get these twins released into a proper forest, then her genes will contribute to the next generations and the future conservation of the species. Yeah?
If Gober should survive longer, her children would be separated from her one day. The life she can only dream of now would be available to the twins. There's no growing up without fear. Little orangutans also miss their mothers a lot during an examination. And they will need to get used to anesthesia too. Other orangutans must cope with worse things. Here, a motherless childhood and youth. But for the past 1.5 years, their blind mother has been a good mother for girl Ginting and boy Ganteng. She can't see the people who approach their cage today, but she has a sense of foreboding. She'd prefer to hide now in another tree. Up in the canopy. Gober had a funny feeling about it. For Vet Yenny and the strange visitors, the countdown has started. The day has come where everything could change for the 3 orangutans. But right now, Ginting and Ganteng's horror reigns over everything they encountered so far. Again, their mother has fallen deeply asleep, and they're separated from her. This will be a risky surgery. The preparation already shows the crucial point: to minimize the risk of infection after the operation. After cutting the eyelashes and hair, Gober's nails need to be clipped. The surgeon from CBM Indonesia, the Christoffel Blinden Mission, successfully replaced the opaque cornea with artificial ones on countless Indonesians already. Will Gober leave her eyes alone? Her eyelids are temporarily sutured. The medical examination shows that Ginting and Ganteng are both healthy, but they also pose an unpredictable risk for their freshly operated mother. The twins hardly realize that some work is done on the new curtains of their cage. They are panicking without their mother. Soon she will wake up. The tarpaulins protect her from bright light. The connecting door will be opened soon, so that Gober and her children will be reunited again without any interference. But after the quiet night, the next trauma can't be avoided.
I'll examine Gober now, clean her wounds and lay an infusion. She didn't eat much during the past few days, and we hope that we won't need to worry about her condition after today.
Gober reflexively tried to hit the blowgun, even though she couldn't see it. But the dart hits perfectly. The goal during the following days: avoid infection. Luckily, Gober left her sutured eyelids alone. Now Vet Jenny can undo the sutures. What about the little ones? Better keep an eye on them. Ginting and Ganteng seem to understand. It's 3 days after the surgery. Good news for the head of the Sumatran Orang-Utan conservation program. Still, Vet Jenny and Ian Singleton think it may take weeks until Gober will be able to see well again. If infection can be avoided, that is. After that, a decision needs to be made that will be crucial for Gober.
The question now is, do we release her back into the wild, because she lived all her life in the wild and would have no problem finding food and everything, or is she better served by remaining here in a new facility where we can give her a little island and some grass and some trees to climb on and stuff like that? So it's a question of quality of life now. I mean, if she is so quite elderly, so it may not be in her best interest to go back in the forest and have to compete with other young, fit orangutans and stuff like that.
Life at Janto, the Reintroduction area, proved to be a bit hard for some orangutans.
He's already been in Janto, but was bitten by Smayam, the male with the amputated arm. But it seems like he's kind of the dominant male there now, and other males are targets for him.
This is Sumayam, the boss, despite his handicap. Sometimes he comes back from the forest for a visit. He then assuages his appetite at the cages where other orangutans wait for their reintroduction. The orangutan's kingdom is on the other side of the river. How are things with the daily nest building? The rangers of Gentle Reserve steadily observe the success of their former fosterlings. Suspicion of humans is a desirable thing. The orangutans shall know that keeping their distance can sometimes save their lives. Keeping Sumayam at a distance is also a good idea, both as an adolescent orangutan male and as a female who is already busy enough dealing with her offspring. 2 weeks after the surgery, now Vet Jenny allows a bit more daylight to reach Gober's eyes. Better not hurry things. Another anesthesia is necessary after it could be avoided during the past 2 weeks. Then Gober received the antibiotic ointment in her sleep without her noticing.
We are slowly making progress. In 2 weeks, we might open it up completely, moving step by step. Look how the little one worries about his mother. We first feared that her children could mess with their mummy's eyes, but they didn't, luckily.
Green mangoes on green leaves. How good is Gober's eyesight really? Seeing sometimes evokes fear or aggression. Her behavior clearly shows it. If Gober is now able to see what's happening behind the bars of her cage, bad memories may come back. She would be stupid if she wasn't very careful. Such a reach shows how well she can see after 3 weeks. The twins also grow up well and healthy, and there are no doubts about the success of their mother's eye surgery anymore. But his eyesight is most likely gone forever. Loiser, the twins' father, won't be released again. But it would be great if his home wouldn't be so sparse. Despite Ginting and Gantang's successful development, they still have been living in a cage as wild animals for 4 years. This is a situation Ian couldn't bear anymore. Vet Jenny prepares a transport box and a syringe. It's a day that may lead to a new future in Gober's life. But anesthesia should be avoided with her children.
The idea is to get them to go into this little capture cage where we can separate them off, and then we know that we have them in a place where we can capture them fairly easily, and then we can focus on the mother. But if they don't go in there, it makes everything a lot more complicated.
Milk is the temptation of the hour. The animal keepers need to be very sensitive now.
If we were to get them, then we can easily ask him to turn it off for half an hour and do all this stuff again. What? They're in? Okay. Right.
They have them, eh?
Yeah.
Before Gober can fall into a rage because of this play, it's the blowgunner's big moment. Gober still has no clue about this decision and what it will mean for her.
The longer these two twins have in the forest with their mum, the better the chance of their overall survival. I mean, she's the ultimate teacher for those two kids. Nothing we could do would replicate that. So we want to get them out in the forest with their mum.
Gober knows the procedure in the meantime. And Ian is aware of the risks.
She usually goes high, so when we dart her, we have to be ready in case she's going to fall. And but hopefully she'll go up onto a shelf and fall asleep, and then we'll have to try and get her down from the shelf.
Once again, their mother is taken away from them. Luckily, Gober didn't fall when sleep overpowered her. Now everything must go quickly, so that their separation is as short as possible.
Bawahnya ditahan ya.
Maybe for the last time, Vet Jenny takes a look at Gober's eyes. Check. There's a second doctor, and off they go to the transport box.
Posisinya tengkurap ya.
And here's the syringe with the antidote. Clutched together in fear, while their mother wakes up again, it's their turn. The plan is to lure them into a smaller box. But only daughter Ginting plays along. Gantang refuses. Now Ian Singleton has to prove his animal keeper skills.
No. Gandang, terus. Yuk. Tutup. Pelan.
Most of the time, Loiser could hear his children and their mother from the cage opposite them. For the blind orangutan male, the world turns a bit darker now. The twins are supposed to move from their box to the one where Gober is. But it's unexpectedly quiet in there.
She's just starting to move around and explore the inside of the box a little bit, but she's still laid out on her back and obviously still quite sedated.
So relax, life.
Nanti aja, masih 10 menit lagi lah.
They plan to be on their way at sundown. But Gober isn't completely awake yet.
She already awake, but we waiting until she on the sitting position and just make sure she not under anesthesia before we put together with the babies. There's a little worry if we put the babies and she's still under anesthesia. She will be trying to attack the babies because she didn't really understand what is it.
There's no way around waiting now. If their departure is delayed, the transport will need to happen during the scorching heat of the following day.
We will try giving the atipamezole again, Ian.
But then Gober finally comes to, and the mother and her children are reunited again. Their new Home will be quite wobbly, though. After the trepidation about Gober's well-being, 12 hours on Indonesian country roads are the lesser of two evils.
It's been a long day and quite a traumatic recovery, but it seems that she's okay now, so we're pretty much ready to go.
Despite the time pressure, feeding and observation are still important.
You're on the road, you're always wondering if you're going to have any problems or not. Once we get to Janto, the road's pretty terrible.
Luckily, this day isn't as hot as usual. The heat would turn the box into an oven. 12 hours later, it's the vital phase of the operation. Gober seems to be wide awake, but doesn't have too much of an appetite. Time for changing the vehicle. Now that the box is even less stable than before, Gober is really concerned about her children's safety. For a good reason.
It's a difficult trip, this one, yeah. I mean, since yesterday, that was probably the worst sort of recovery from anesthesia that we've had. It's been a long trip. We got away late. We're coming in now. The road is really badly eroded because of all the rain we've had recently. And we still don't know if we're going to be able to get across the river with the cars. We're going to have to solve another problem once we get there. But I think we just try and get there first, and then we'll deal with that.
Those dark clouds do not bode well. They're almost there. They pass the Reintroduction camp without stopping, as their last obstacle, the river's water level, continues to rise. Don't get stuck. Don't tip over. Success. The nightmare inside the wobbly box comes to an end. At least, the ground stopped moving. What else is there? A new, unknown cage. The orangutan's world changed completely.
She came out without too much difficulty. I was a bit worried that she might be so angry with the trip. I don't really want to spend too much time here because I think the most important thing for these guys now is just to get some rest, which means just we'll put a bit of fruit out and then just leave them and let them get a good night's sleep. But looks a lot better than she did last night, that's for sure. Yeah, I mean, she's back to her old self.
Time for the Reintroduction camp's team to regain their strength as well. Saving orangutans in Sumatra requires Ian Singleton's attention in many areas. He shows the head of the camp how he is still warning the Aceh province about further disasters after the horrific tsunami in 2004. Meanwhile, the population is plagued by landslides and flooding. The destruction of the forests isn't only a threat to the orangutans. Elephants in Aceh, they will be history in 10 years' time. Poachers already use more than 300 roads that were built illegally.
That's the elephant distribution. Exactly the areas we predict are going to go first. It potentially takes us from this scenario, which is like the old spatial plan with all this forest off limits, to this situation where all this area in red is potentially going to be lost.
The next morning, Ian and Mukhlisin from the Reintroduction camp want to see if the newcomers have recovered. They are still frightened, and Gober hasn't eaten. The two men decide to keep their distance.
Yeah, she's in the middle always. I think she's still probably very suspicious of people. She's just been through a very traumatic trip, and she's probably just, more focused on what's going to happen next, because she has no idea that she's got 3 or 4 weeks here just to relax. But she will be sort of apprehensive about everything until she sees a few days go by that nothing really bad happens. And then I think she will start to look around and see that there's fruit out there and there's wildlife and things like that.
And other orangutans, for example, who don't only sit on the cage for making contact.
Gober obviously knows there's food there, but she's not interested, and she's still too stressed.
Formerly reintroduced orangutans, who come by the cages once in a while, wait for their chance.
Ah, look at that. Who? Ah, Ginting, yeah. So now Reuben's begging. No, yeah, I've got it. Yeah. Well, they'll learn. That's something they have to learn. You can't mess around here.
Freedom won't be all peaches and cream for Gober after 6 years. She may be able to see again, but her offspring doesn't really know how to cope with life in the jungle. They will be part of a wilderness where a lot of destruction takes place. In Sumatra, wild animals are often only welcome if they are of any use for business, no matter if they are mistreated, dead, or alive. When wilderness protection projects are turned into tourist attractions, orangutans who had to stay dependent risk to be presented like circus animals. These confused animals may then be marketed as wild Sumatra. Luckily, tourism is prohibited in Gober's new habitat, the Janto Nature Reserve. It's 1 month after their arrival. For the first time, their door to freedom is open. Ginting, the 4-year-old daughter, dares to explore the new world first. It almost seems as if her stronger brother Ganteng wanted to hold her back. But what about Gober? Why does she hesitate? Ganteng wants to stay close to his mother, other than his curious sister, who is fascinated by the open door. But then, after quite some time, Gober makes her decision. The fruit are up high, especially for her 2 4-year-olds. Gober holds on to the cage until the very end, where her son Ganteng still wants to hold her back. Ginting is right by her side. Ganteng won't leave the cage, even as his mother and sister move in the direction of the forest. Just a quick glance back, that's all. He's panicking. He must feel so lost now. Can't Gober just go back and take her confused son's hand? Or would she put this unexpected chance at risk? What a relief for her. The time when she was blind and the time amongst humans falls off her. His mother's calls from a distance of 50 meters become more and more agitated. Will she be able to reach him still? It seemed as if Ganteng wasn't able to leave his inner cage. But then, he escapes it. But he won't leave the concrete foundation for now. With his 4 years of age, he can be considered a child. They are so similar to us, but still so different. Finally, Ganteng follows his mother's path. Not only Gober watches her son's next steps with excitement and suspense. Ian and the other observers also hope that the 3 orangutans will be quickly reunited. Gober is waiting. Will Ganteng climb up to her without hesitation and seize all that fear? There are only a few meters between them.
She still really does not like people and doesn't trust anything, and today's been traumatic for all of them, so she's very, very apprehensive. And it doesn't help that the kid is quiet. I wish he would start crying, because then she would probably react a bit quicker. Come on, very close now. Almost there.
Then Gober approaches Ganteng. It's only the length of an arm now.
Stupid, she's just behind you. There you go.
But neither dares to do the touch that would end the separation. Ginting follows her mother into the dense green. Did Gober just abandon her son? A young orangutan whose strongest bond seems to have lost its own strength? Maybe Gober is bothered too by the new freedom under observation. Slowly, mother and daughter move further away from Ganteng. Only a few moments later, Ginting starts collecting branches and leaves for their nest. Ian isn't really worried about the two of them, but rather about Ginting, who suddenly appears in a much higher tree.
They're actually getting further and further away from poor little Ginting here, who's still sat in this tree all on his own. The weather's closing in, it's going to be dark in half an hour or something. So we have to do whatever we can to try and make sure he's safe.
They keep night watch under the tree. Wild hogs and tigers could attack him on the ground. As he can't hold onto the tree anymore due to exhaustion, he moves down. His deadliest foes are the cold and exhaustion now. Ian arrives only a short time later.
When I got here at 4, that's where I found him, and he looked quite pitiful, to be honest. It's been raining and damp and everything else. I was a bit concerned when I first saw him and so I went closer, and I was amazed to find that I could actually stand right next to him and actually sort of stroke him. I wanted to see if he was warm or cold or what. Yeah?
Ian considers the risk of Ginting not being able to survive the day as too high. But as he is supposed to be caught, he escapes to a tree every time. Luckily, he seems to be stronger than expected. Periods of sleep and recovery are part of the emergency plan. And getting food into him, if possible. But mistrustful, just like his mother, he doesn't allow humans to approach him.
I mean, the poor little guy, the shock must be immense, yeah? The trauma he's going through. I mean, he's born in a cage, he spent his entire, almost 4 years in a cage. He's suddenly, the cage has been opened and his mum and his sister have gone. He's tried to go after them and failed. He's obviously afraid of the forest. He doesn't have the confidence there. He's struggling to climb.
But the young orangutan's will to live and the strengthening food slowly help him to turn the corner. Gober and Ginting are about 100 meters away from him in the meantime. But it doesn't seem as if she would want to get closer to her son. Life above the ground is a challenge for her daughter Ginting as well. Especially the most common orangutan technique is demanding. When Gober connects two trees like a living bridge, Ginting rarely realizes what to do. When shall she hold on to mother's fur? When is it better to climb by herself? This is usually part of the daily climbing course every young orangutan needs to master from the first day of his life in the wild. Gober needs to remember many things too. Tasty fruit don't just fall into her mouth. Tree bark sometimes must serve as infant food. Cambium below the bark is also quite filling. But isn't there something more troubling for Gober than an empty stomach? Can an orangutan mother simply abandon her child after 4 years? For mother and daughter, the second day of freedom ends like the previous, in a nest. When Gober wakes up the next morning and looks down at the observers, she doesn't know that her son is safe. The previous evening, Ganteng let himself be lured back to his cage, where he instantly looked for shelter.
I still haven't given up total hope that Gober may come back. I mean, it's possible she just wants to secure herself and get her own confidence, and then we'll think about Ganteng again and come back this way and see if you can find him. In which case, if we look like she wants him and he wants to be with her, we will open the door and try that again.
Mother and daughter leave their nest in the direction of the warm sun.
I was quite shocked when she did leave him so easily. I mean, she came back for him once and that was it. He didn't follow and okay, gone. That surprised me more than anything, not the fact that she's made a pragmatic choice to try and focus on herself and Ginting and not risking all three of them by trying to take too much on.
Their long rest after waking up could imply a restless and sleepless night. It is possible that 2 children would have been too much for an orangutan mother who is not at her best of strength anymore, and with a son who doesn't stay by her side and might panic when climbing in high altitude. Taking care of only one child may be the only viable alternative for Gober. Which doesn't mean that everything from there on is child's play.
Ginting's never climbed around in trees before, and this is one of the things that worries me more than anything now, is whether Ginting is going to be sensible or whether she's going to take stupid risks and have an accident. But I think Gober also realizes the same thing and is focusing very much on making sure that Ginting is safe and not dangling herself off tiny little dead branches at 50 meters up a high tree, you know.
Some of the experiences Gober could gather years ago in this forest pay off now. She had to simply taste things, especially as her eyesight started to fade. Some leaves showed her the way to juicier fruit higher up. In the crown of an Artocarpus elasticus, a wild breadfruit tree, Gober found some treats. Other than with her daughter Gaby 6 years ago, she can now care for Ginting like any other healthy mother. The Artocarpus fruit are precious food. Luckily, there are lots of them, and other orangutan food available at the Janto Reserve. Soon, the observers on the ground are convinced that the 2 of them will be able to provide for themselves. With only one child to care for, Gober doesn't shy away from any giant jungle tree. No matter how patient she is, Ginting still sometimes seems to be over-challenged and shows it too. But her progress also shows. Gober would need to have far more helping hands for 2 children of this size. Ganteng will get to know other orangutans one day. And Sumatra's rainforest as well.